I remember when I got my first camera. It was a little silver digital camera. Do you remember? Anyone else got I left the store and I felt a soul set free to go capture the world, begging to be captured, right? And I went out into the world and I saw the things and I was going, all right, it's in my head. I know exactly what I want to do. I know exactly the kind of picture I'm preparing to take. I have a lot of ideas in my head, and the only thing really stopping that idea from being in my hands is I just haven't done it yet. So let's go do it. Let's go get the things. Let's go take the pictures, and let's go show the world what's coming through my mind or my mind's eye, right? And I would take the pictures, and it didn't have the depth that I was expecting it to have. It didn't have the color. It didn't have the French would call it the je ne sais pas. There was something, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't there. You know what I mean? It wasn't happening the way it was supposed to be happening. It wasn't this, and then you start talking to other photographers, and you realize, Garrett, that camera doesn't take the pictures you want to take. This other camera that's way more expensive takes the pictures you want to take. If you have the other lens, the kind of lens you're supposed to be taking in that kind of spot. And if that lens only takes pictures in that kind of time, then you got to buy this other lens to do this other picture over here. And then you got to get these other things. And you got to buy this insanely expensive software called Photoshop to make the person you're taking a picture of more attractive. And and you start learning, there's a lot more to getting what I have in my mind down on paper, and it takes a lot more tools and skills and other things going on, and sometimes you have to have just the right lighting and all that sort of stuff. You're going, wow, okay, all I have is this though. That's all I got. And then you go throughout the rest of your life, you start to learn more things. You start to learn like, hey, sorry, Garrett, that coffee pot doesn't make the cup of coffee you're looking for. And those tools don't fix the thing on your car you're trying to fix. You got to get these other tools. And you realize a lot of things in life start getting a lot easier once you get the right tools in your hand, but sometimes it can be quite a bear to get those tools in your hands. And you just kind of struggle going, well, what do I do? How do I? And today we're starting a series called Arrival, where we're going to be talking about God arriving on earth on the day of Christmas morning. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sticking in this one section of the Bible, John chapter 1, verses 1 through 18, and we're going to spend 4 weeks there. But what we're going to find is that John is sitting there trying to describe to us something that we desperately need to know. But the only tools he has to tell us this is words. And they're not the perfect tools to explain what he's trying to say about God. Now, unfortunately, they're the best tools we got. So there's that. No shade towards words. Words are great. But when we start talking about the transcendent God and everything in Christmas and what's going on there, John will find himself struggling. And we'll find him doubling back sometimes, trying to let me say the same thing over again, just a little differently, so you make sure you hear what I'm trying to say. And the reason is because we are struggling to understand God. And what is it that he's going to be trying to convey to us? What is it he's going to be trying to put on paper so that we can know for forever? The glory of Christmas Day. That's what he's going to try to convey to us. The glory of Christmas Day. Like when we stop every single year and say, let's celebrate this season again. When we celebrate his birth again. When we gather with our friends and our families and we share mornings and evenings and gifts and songs with each other. And we sing the same songs that some of us, sound booth, doesn't particularly like, but we're going to still call him a Christian anyways. Why do we? Like, what exactly took place there that made us all come back to it one year after another, after another, after another for 2,000 years? And John is here to tell us that. And he takes, and if you have your Bibles, open up to John chapter 1. And he says this, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he was with God in the beginning, and through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was the light of life, and that life was the light to all mankind. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we have seen his glory, and the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. This is where he starts. When we're going, okay, all right, how are we going to express the glory of Christmas morning? What took place there? He starts in the beginning. In this passage, we're going to see God's flesh, and we're going to see God's glory, and we're going to see God's dwelling. Now, in this passage, there is basically, there's like a dog pile of accomplishments that God pulls off in this one little section of Scripture. It is amazing. And so God, when John, if you were to say, John, what is it that happened on Christmas? What is it that we're celebrating? What's going on there? He would say, what happened that day was the Word became flesh. And he dwelt among us. And we saw his glory. Well, what's the Word? What's the Word? And what's amazing, because John is telling what we've come to be, he's telling a story of what we've come to call a gospel. There are 4 gospels in the book in the Bible. They're the stories of Jesus' life. And John starts off by teaching something called high Christology. He wants to make sure you and I can understand something about this man, Jesus. And the most important thing is who the guy was. Who do you say Jesus is? This is the first question any of us could ever have any right to ask another Christian. When we come together and we start going, oh, do I like this church? Or am I on the same page with this Christian? Or all this sort of thing. The first question we all have a right to ask is, what do you say about Jesus? Who do you say he is? And the word Christology just means the study of Jesus, but when you start talking about Christology, we're talking about something more than that. We're talking about what view of Jesus do you have? Do you have the view that he was just a good teacher and kind of nice and he had a peace sign? He said, hey guys, love people. Or do you believe that he was God? Do you believe that he was the Messiah? Do you believe that what Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God? And that's the most important thing you can come to say. And John's going, we got to get this down right at the beginning. And so when he says, the Word became flesh, you go, well, what is the Word? Who is the Word? What is that? He says, in the beginning was the Word. Now, who grew up reading the Bible, going to church, that sort of stuff? Yeah. Where does your mind go when you hear in the beginning? Genesis, right? Yes. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's everyone reading this book would have been like, oh, yes, that's obviously what he's going to do. Hey, who here's ever had a Bible you just loved? It was a perfect translation. It was great. It was your favorite version of the Bible, and then they updated it, and then it kind of shifted a little bit. You know what I mean? And then you get to those familiar sections of the Bible, you start reading it, and you go, oh, and then you just don't even read the words on the page. Even though the words changed, you keep reading that original verse you just grew up reading. You know what I mean? I wonder if that's what a lot of people thought here when they're like, John's about to say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And he goes, nope, in the beginning was the Word. So whoever this person was that put on flesh was there at the very beginning. And the Word was with God. Okay, so he's there watching it all happen. And then it says, the Word was God. Oh, and right there you get 2 parts of the Trinity that they're not the same thing, but they're together and they're both God. And You kind of go, okay, this is getting kind of interesting. And what else do we learn about this word? He was the God in the begin. He was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. It was an eye-opening moment for me when someone just said this out loud for me to hear it. Maybe everyone just automatically knows this when you hear the idea that Jesus was God. I always knew Jesus was God. That's what I always believed it. But it was a really weird thing for me. It just never occurred to me when I heard someone say, when we say Jesus was God, he was the same. It means he was right there when God said, "Let there be light." Jesus was right there. We said, "Let there be land and water, and let's divide them." Jesus was right there. And nothing that was made came to being but what came through him. And so I want you to think about what John's saying to these people. It's like he's saying, listen, everybody, close your eyes. You don't have to, but imagine you're closing your eyes. Imagine Christmas Day. Imagine the day Jesus was born, right? Everybody, you got it? Now move backwards. You got the Roman Empire, the Greeks, you got the Jewish exile. Move backwards. Keep going. You got God calling Abraham. Keep going, keep going. You got God creating the worlds. Okay, keep going. All you have is a globe. Get rid of that. Get rid of the stars. Get rid of the sky. Get rid of everything where it's just dark. It's just nothing. It's just the Word. There at the beginning. Now take every last bit of that and jam it into a manger. It became flesh. Living in the world he created. Now open to the elements. Open to sickness and hunger. Loneliness and sadness and joy. And family. He has these two people who are just in his house for some reason. And without them, he's lost. They need to feed him. They need to change him. They need to clothe him. They need to do everything for him. And yet he is the God who made everything. Living life down on this earth in a way he's never experienced before. And what John says is when they came to see the baby in the manger, what they saw was God's glory. All the glory of God packed into a person. Fully God, fully man. These are the really complicated parts of Christianity that we don't tackle all the time, but it's important. And now people are looking at God's glory, is what John says. Which is weird, because there's a weird thing we know about God's glory. It's that it kills people. You ever know that? Did you know that? There's this really weird story in the Old Testament where the Bible says that God and Moses would speak like friends do. They just spent time together in a way that none of us have ever spent time together. And Moses spent all this time on Mount Sinai, and they would write the law, and he would talk to Moses about how he wants his people to be, the whole thing, and they just spent time together. And then one day Moses says something weird. You get these ideas that pop in your head, and then you just kind of say it out loud. You just go, we'll see where this goes. And they're hanging out, and one day he goes, God, show me your glory. And God goes, well, no one's ever asked me that before. Okay. And we had to start figuring out some sort of solution, because I can't just show you my glory, it'll kill you. And they figured out this plan where he's like, I'll put you in this little cleft of a rock, and I'll cover your hand, I'll cover your eyes with my hand, and then I'll walk by you. And as I'm about to leave the cave, I'll let you look and see the back part of my shirt, the afterglow. And as my youth pastor said when I was a kid, was, if God's face will kill you, his backside's going to hurt. And Moses was lit up, like he was glowing. He's like, I can't believe what I just saw. And John's sitting here going, but in Jesus Christ, we saw his glory. We saw his glory. We just sang a song, which is one of my favorite Christmas songs. It's one of those ones that I've carried with me from my youth. Hark the Herald Angels Sings. And when you just it becomes such a... I personally become so happy that it's around now that I just think of it as like, Here Comes Santa Claus and any other Christmas. You forget that it's a hymn that teaches us some really rich truths about the Bible. And we just sang these words where it says, veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. Hail the incarnate deity. You notice how he says, veiled in flesh, God we see. Not veiled in flesh, God is hidden. Like when Jesus was walking around earth, he had some sort of disguise to throw us off God's trail. But no, it was a filter that allowed us to see and look at God's glory in a way we never could before. If you wanted to go study the sun, you said, I want to get a good picture of the sun, I want to know what the sun looks like. One thing you had better not do is go get a telescope and just go point at the sun, right? It'd be the last thing you ever look at. You know what I mean? It would burn your eyes. But there are ways you can look at the sun. You got to get a super strong filter. You got to put it on there to where it'd be so dark that you could never see almost anything else. And it takes away most of the light of the sun, and you can see details if you get a strong enough telescope. Once again, that whole tool thing, you got to get the right tools for the job or whatever. But you would never use that filter to go look at birds and put on your binoculars, right? You wouldn't see anything. But if you put it on your telescope, go look at the sun, you can actually see what the sun looks like because you've had to remove all the power of the light, and then you can look at it and you can see what it really looks like. That's what it's like when Jesus, he's not... When Jesus was on earth, it was not his time not being God. It was his time where God could walk around on earth and people could see it. We can read about it. They told us what he did. And so there are a lot of times where you and I probably just grew up knowing, hey, God's a good God and God's a righteous God and he has a good life for us. But you know what? It's hard. The life he's calling us to is hard. It's too difficult for me. If only God knew what it was like down here, maybe he wouldn't have such a high bar for us. Right? Yeah, it's really easy to be perfect when you're up in heaven, but we're all down here on earth where things kind of pull you in different directions. And then God showed up on earth. The Word became flesh. And we can see this God who's perfect in all of his ways. And we can see this God whose righteousness reaches up into the heavens. And we can see how that righteous God would interact with a woman who's been sick for 12 years. Or talk to a lady who's mourning her brother's loss. We can see how a God who is perfect in all of his ways would interact with people who are pulling him in 1,000 different directions, and every one of them has an ulterior motive, and he deals with them with love and kindness and truth, and he's going to handle this. And John says, look, this is God among us. He's living a perfect life here. We saw his glory. And it was filled with grace and truth. A couple years ago, I coached Sam's football team. And they were 6-year-olds. And, I was working on this drill to get them to work on the length of time between them hiking the ball and the team moving, okay? I know that doesn't seem like a drill you'd have to do, but it is. There was a bit of a lag time between hiking the ball and the play starting. And so I was trying to get them to realize, hey, you're actually supposed to move quickly there. Like the hike's going to be that's your key. That's your clue to know, okay, now you start moving. Now you just jump. And so I had this drill where I was like, I'm going to yell hike, and then you just start moving. Like you go do your thing as quick as you can, and they're not getting it. They're not understanding the drill at all. And I explain it again, and I explain it again. And then somewhere off the sideline, one of the moms, who for some reason didn't sign up to coach, yelled, "How about an example?" I go, "Oh, what a great idea." They don't know what I'm saying. And so I go to the assistant coach and go, you're going to run the drill, and I'm going to do it. And I went from coach to player. And I actually got on the line, and I actually did. I said, this is what I'm asking you to do. And what John is saying is, when Christmas Day came, Jesus got on the line. He went from being the God in the heavens saying, this is my righteous law and these are my commands. You must follow my commands, all of which are still there. The law is still there. We're still got the Ten Commandments. Still got the rules. There's still a high bar God has for us. But all of a sudden, he went from being the guy who said, here's the perfect thing I've set down for you, to now let me show you how you live this life. Let me show you what I'm trying to get you to do. Let me show you what I'm inviting you into, because it's pretty life-changing. It's pretty attractive, actually. And as you go through this life, the way I'm calling you to go through this life, you will see that I'm not calling you to a life of drudgery or anything like that. I'm calling you to a better life, a better now, a better way that leads to less regret and less shame, less guilt, fewer broken relationships, hopefully. Because I'm God, and I want what is good for you. And all of a sudden, we not only have God who tells us what is good, but a God who comes down and lives what is good. And we can go, oh, I want that. I want that. And it changes everything. And then finally, we've got God's flesh and we've got God's glory. And I told you that it is basically a dog pile of accomplishments that God has done through Christmas morning. And here's the biggest one. In Christmas, we get God's dwelling. And you might be thinking, no, Garrett, the glory, like him becoming a human, like that's like the biggest accomplishment, right? Those are the ones that are really big. Like you took a really big God, put him in a really small person. You took all of his glory, you put him into a person. Like that's the big thing. How are you going to say that God being with people is the biggest accomplishment? And here's why. Because God's community with God, relationship with God, all that sort of stuff is the problem of the Bible. Every problem, everything that breaks down, everything that goes wrong that the Bible tells us about, all stems back one way or another to the fact that God can't dwell with people and people can't dwell with God. Somehow, it all boils down to this, that in the Garden of Eden, everything was good, everything was perfect. There were people and God living together is a wonderful thing, and then they sinned and they could no longer be with God. And then God, out of love, comes up with a system called the temple system. And the system was a way where God would say, I'll get close to you, but we can't be with each other. But I will be close to you. It's going to be inside the temple. So the Jewish temple had three sections, like the outer courts, and it had the holy place, and it had the most holy place. And God said, my presence will be there. I'll dwell right there. That's where I'll be. And you'll know that I love you, and you know that I care for you, but you can't be with me, but you can be close. We can have this whole system together. And the first temple was actually called the tabernacle. It was a tent version of it. It was drapes and curtains, and they had to be able to move it because they were in the wilderness, and when God said, hey, I need you to move over here, they'd have to pack it all up and move it over there and set it up. And even there, they had the most holy place, and God said, I'll be right here, and that's where my presence is going to be. And you can be close to me, but not with me. And then John comes along. He says, the Word became flesh, and He dwelt among us. But he used an utterly amazing word when he said that. He used the word tabernacle. He said, God put on flesh, and He tabernacled among us. That as Jesus walked through the world, it was like the temple of God, all of his presence, everything was just right there. And he was just with people. Where it used to be once a year, one man would be able to walk into that room and do one sacrifice, and then we were done. And now it's just like crowds are groping in, they're grabbing his shirts and his clothes, and one person gets healed from it, and these people over here say, hey, Jesus, come eat with me. We're having dinner and the whole thing. Kids just come run and jump on his lap, and he's just with people. He's just with them. God is with man for the first time since the garden. And with Christmas, we get the beginning of the end of the biggest problem we have: separation from God. And when Jesus came along, he came in grace and in truth, where he said, hey, listen to me. Anyone who will come to me may come to me. But he didn't make things easy. It's not like he just started brushing things aside that everyone used to care about. It's not like he and God the Father, he's like, oh, old dad up there, he's just, stuck in his ways, but I'm the cool guy, No. He came in truth. Where there's never a person who ever walked up to him and heard him say, man, that's okay. You just do your thing. That when every single time when people encountered the grace of Jesus, that person walked away changed, not Jesus. Jesus stayed right where he was. And John says that in him was life. That in Jesus Christ, because Jesus came, we can have life. Because it solves the biggest problem we have, which is a life separated from God. And so, as we go throughout this Christmas season, let us be a church, let us be people, let us be families who are grateful for the grace that God has brought into our lives. And let's be willing to share it with others. Let us live in the knowledge and in the joy of knowing that we have a Savior and he was born on Christmas Day.